Metroid, a series filled with worlds that isolate you in expansive environments, adventures that drive an eagerness to explore, minimal stories that convey that need for exploration, and beautiful ambient tracks that drive all those motifs home. It's a franchise adored by people all over the world, and it gave us the interstellar badass Samus Aran. Now there's a lady I do not want to get on the bad side of. Over the years, we've seen several titles put us in the space boots of the badass bounty hunter as we traversed our way through SR-388 or meandered through Zebes. And while I love all those titles, there's one specifically that I want to talk about that just might be my favorite in the entire series. Metroid Prime. Now, it's important to provide a little background on this gem before we get scanning on all the details that make Metroid Prime such an amazing title. Metroid Prime came off the back of Super Metroid, which is still considered by many to not only be the best Metroid game, but perhaps the greatest game of all time. I can tell you that my brother falls into the latter of the two, and we've had a few discussions debating it. What you can't debate about Super Metroid was that it improved on every single aspect from the original game in spades, and it set a precedent for quality and theming in Metroid games that lives on to this day. What's interesting though is that we had to wait more than 8 years before we got to assume the role of Samus in our quest to explore space and whoop some ass. Nintendo just decided, fuck it, the N64 isn't gonna work for Metroid, so we're just gonna throw her into a different game, so you'll just feel worse that there isn't a new game coming. Sound familiar? However, after the long stretch with no games from the series, we were finally greeted with Metroid Prime on their new flagship system, the GameCube. Would it be worth the wait though? Retro had a huge task on their hands when they were given the task to resuscitate the series from the ashes of Ridley's numerous corpses. Not to mention, once information about the game emerged, it startled gamers everywhere. Not only are we making a giant leap to 3D, but it's going to be in first person? I don't know about this, man. Aren't Retro a new studio? Plus, I'm a little skeptical about this FPS bullshit interfering with my Metroid experience. Can they deliver and make this a game that lives up to the Metroid name? I'm pretty sure you know the answer. Since story usually takes a backseat in Metroid games, there is honestly not too much going on in terms of plot. But the premise of the game is essentially this. In the beginning, you reply to a distress signal, only to find a space pirate frigate moored in the atmosphere of the nearby planet, Talon 4. In the process of exploring the derelict ship, you learn how to play the game by becoming familiar with its base mechanics. Then you fight a boss, run into Ridley, he's alive, what the fuck? Lose your gear, and escape during a ship is about to explode, so you need to get the fuck out moment. That all harkens back to classic Metroid. You follow the beast down to the planet, and in true Metroid fashion are left to get lost and just soak in all that gooey, immersive Metroid goodness. There's not much in the way of story, and I'm totally on board with it. Giving players the chance to get lost from the outset and get immersed is exactly what you want with any good Metroid title, and Prime nails it. In the case that you want to learn more about the story, you have the ability to scan nearby objects that provide information on your surroundings and what the space pirates are up to. Judging by the experiments, namely the fucking reincarnated space dragon thing, it's clear that they're still up to no good, but being able to immerse ourselves as much or as little as we want via some extra reading is a lovely mechanic. Now, the scan visor is fantastic, and it adds a layer of immersion unseen in any of the other titles, but one of my favorite aspects of the game is how it handles the shift into the first-person perspective. Looking through Samus's eyes gives you a view of her HUD, showcasing her different visors, health bar, ammunition, etc. If it's important, then you better believe it's on there. From the start, this does a fantastic job of putting you in the shoes of the biggest badass in known space. As you take damage, switch between your beam and your visor options, and expand all your ammo, you see it all update right in front of her. From the start, it places you right into every fight, puzzle, and platforming section, and it just feels right. I don't have a better way of describing that, honestly. Obviously, we know that we're playing as Samus and seeing these changes right in her visor, but a great game will always include subtle elements that add layers of complexity. It's like the difference between a whatever lasagna and a great lasagna. You can't just lay some noodles, cheese, and sauce into a pan and say, can't get better than that. It's gotta have layers, and Metroid Prime does this so well. This viewpoint puts you into Samus' shoes like never before because of the little touches that Retro has added. The rain in Talon Overworld dripping on the visor, steam bursting from pipes obscuring your vision, explosions reflecting in the visor, illuminating Samus' eyes. Chances are you maybe haven't noticed these little details in the game, but that's because they've been layered in so subtly. Retro did such a good job of translating everything that was amazing about the 2D experience and moving it into the 3D, but that's enough prattling on about the perspective because the game gets so much more right merely beyond that shift. It's obvious that the perspective change itself does a fantastic job of immersing you. But the environments and music on their own do wonders in making you feel like you're alone in a big bad world of space pirates, Metroids, and all sorts of other crazy shit. As you saunter through the near empty halls of the Chosen Ruins, you really feel like you're all alone in this place, steeped in wonder. You're treading on ancient history, and if you can, you'd rather not leave a big old blueprint. Likewise, not only do the distinct locales of Metroid Prime immerse you and make you feel relatively isolated, but they're just that. Distinct. As you move from the fiery lakes of the Magmor Caverns into the snowy fields of Phendrana and the rain-soaked forests of Town Overworld, you get that sense of immersion nearly no other game can provide. You never have to deal with loading screens either, as any loading is cleverly disguised in the form of doors separating each room and the elevators that transport you between each location. In this way, the level of immersion that you have whilst playing is rarely ever dropped, leaving you to go about your adventure without ever realizing that things were loading up. And despite the differences between each location, they all feel right at home in the world of Metroid. You add that to the layers of immersion the game adds via its perspective change, and baby, you got a Metroid stew cooking. Now, the world of Talon 4 from the start seems big, and not just big like the size of Liam's belly, I mean substantially large. Luckily, the game incorporates a wonderful map system that is not only easy to read, but visually appealing. In conjunction with the map, the game also provides you with just a smattering of hints as a way of providing you with a general direction to go. In this way, you never feel like the game is holding your fucking hand and telling you exactly what you need to do. But it also doesn't leave you completely in the dark, hoping you share the same thoughts as the Iron Maiden song. It's just enough direction to keep you on the right track while still giving you all the freedom you need to feel isolated and wanting to explore. And once again, you won't feel any frustrating lulls in immersion. I mentioned before that the game controls really well, and the gameplay is as fun as you could possibly expect from a Metroid title. It's responsive, tight, fluid, kinda like that cup of coffee I had this morning. Basically, it's fucking delicious. Switching to the first person was always going to be a challenge, but platforming feels just as wonderful as any of its 2D counterparts. As you jump, the camera angles down slightly, helping to show off your trajectory. Not only that, but Samus's jump arcs are precise and feel comfortable. You're never unsure if there's a jump you can make or if you aren't going to land on the platform, unless you're being hasty, which I admittedly am sometimes. But that's your own fault. Likewise, shooting also feels natural and precise. The game uses an intuitive lock-on system that allows you to strafe and move about quickly as you dodge incoming attacks and rain hell back onto your opponent. I would understand if people had fears about Samus feeling slow in comparison to her 2D counterparts, and in some ways she's still not as light on her feet, but combat is done wonderfully, and again, if you fail to lock on and dodge, it's gonna be your fault, in which case you clearly need to get good. The beauty of the game lies in how it pieces everything together to still feel like Metroid despite the large amount of changes that had to come about from the perspective switch. Even though you look through Samus's visor, the game doesn't feel like an FPS. Sure, it's got some shooting, and that's one aspect to a Metroid game that we enjoy. It's just balanced so well between shooting, puzzles, and platforming that it takes on the form of an adventure game. As it should. Metroid isn't always about shooting first and asking questions later. It dares to do just a little bit more. I think it's pretty clear at this point that I love this game, more than 10 years later, and it still floors me with its beautiful presentation and amazing gameplay. It lives up to the Metroid name well, and for that, I've got to give it my seal of approval, which, in this case, how about Legend? That seems kind of fitting. And speaking of legends, I'm Wally the Legend. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye!